Stop sharing the result now. All right. So start sharing my screen and start this presentation. Well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Domingo Pollone. I'm with the City of Sunnyvale Environmental Services Department. And you are here for the Waterwise Winter Color for Habitat Gardens webinar with our dear instructor, Juanita Salisbury. This webinar is sponsored, hosted by the City of Santa Clara, as well as the City of Sunnyvale, and the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, or BOSCA. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. This is a webinar, and so attendees are muted by default, but you will be able to ask questions. And to ask questions, that you're actually encouraged to do it. And to do so, you can do it two ways. You can either raise your hand with the raise hand button, or type your question in the Q&A using the Q&A chat. With Victoria, will be monitoring that chat to make sure that all your questions reach the instructor today. The webinar is being recorded, and all the recordings will be made available in a couple weeks from now. A little bit about BOSCA. So BOSCA is a special district that represents 26 cities, water districts, private water companies, all of which purchase wholesale water from San Francisco Regional Water System. BOSCA member agencies collectively serve over 1.8 million residents and 40,000 businesses in San Mateo County, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. And BOSCA's goal is to ensure reliable supply of high quality water at a fair price for all of our agencies and their customers. And also consistent with that goal, BOSCA provides a regional water conservation program to support agencies in improving water use efficiency. The landscape education program is one of the elements of that conservation program. So more about that program, the objectives of that program. So while we have BOSCA has made a significant stride in water use efficiency in the past decades, there's still more room for improvement, right? Water conservation, we're striving to make water conservation a way of life here in California. And outdoor water use represents the single largest untapped opportunity for water conservation. And outdoor water use reduction through the use of water efficient plants and innovative techniques can help conserve water and ensure that the future water supply needs of our communities are met. I'm gonna give a little overview of additional ways that you can save water and highlight a couple of programs that we want to promote. Valley Water has several rain barrel rebate options. You can get up to $200 for rain barrel rebates. Those will help you catch rainwater. We also have the BOSCA's Lawn Be Gone landscape transformation program, and rebates go from $1 to $4 per square foot of lawn replaced with drought-tolerant native plants. Some additional ways that you can save water. BOSCA also offers the Smart Controller Rebate and Installation Program. You can use that link to learn more about it. And we also have the optional rain garden rebate program. There are some specifications about that program that you can also check at bayareaconservation.org. Skip this slide and talk a little bit about the rebates that the City of Sunnyvale specifically offers. We encourage people to participate in all of Valley Water's rebates program. Those involve the landscape rebate program that convert high water use lawns into low water use landscapes. You can receive $2 per square foot, but make sure that you apply first. It's important that you learn all of the different steps before you start working on your lawn. And then we also have the gray water rebate program. You can receive up to $400 by converting your laundry into a laundry to landscape system. That's a great way to conserve water by reusing gray water. Also, other resources at Sunnyvale, we have compost that is available for all Sunnyvale residents at the Smart Station, located at 301 Carl Road. You can stop any day from Monday to Sunday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Just grab a shovel and a container to put your compost. There's a 96-gallon limit each time you go there, and you will be required to show proof of residency. We also have compost workshops happening periodically, and you can find more info in our Instagram account, Sunnyvale_environment. There's also the My Watershed Watch Green Gardener program. This is a 10-week program to get certified as a green gardener. You can go into that link that's on the screen right now and learn all about that program. Both how can you participate to become a green gardener and get a list of all certified green gardeners if you want to hire a certified professional. Skip this one. Other resources you can find here: South Bay Green Gardens.org, watersavings.org, and if you want to learn more about other ways to conserve water, you can go to waterwise at valleywater.org. Seconds so you can screenshot or picture of those links. Then Victoria will tell you more about Santa Clara's resources.
So Santa Clara has upped our residential rebate contribution. So residents in the city can now get $4 per square foot, up to a total of $5,000 for converting your lawn. And when we first jumped up to that rate, we were one of the only ones in the state doing it. So we've gotten some really good traction, and we're hoping a lot of you will take advantage of it. If you're stumbling over the rebate process, if you need help with a plant list, if you need help with garden design, I'm going to put my title and my email address in the chat. Please reach out to me. I am happy to do some individualized work for you for free to help you get that rebate going. So take advantage of that. And also, it is time of year to dial down your outdoor watering if you haven't done it already. And nature gave us our best moisture meters. They're the 5 digits, the end of each arm. You can stick a little chopstick in the ground and wiggle it around and insert your finger. If it's feeling some cool moisture, you know that you can turn your irrigation off. If it doesn't feel cool, that means the soil is probably not that moist. So you might need to keep up a little bit of supplemental watering until our rains kick in. But if you want a tool to help you out, you can get one for free at City Hall. The moisture meters are right there as you see pictured. Please don't leave them in the ground. They're not meant to be left. They're meant to be stuck in and taken out and used in different locations. If you don't feel like coming over to City Hall to pick one up, you can get one free from Valley Water, and they will send it straight to your house at no charge. Thanks, Domingo. Domingo, you're muted right now.
I'm so sorry about that. Some upcoming webinars. We have Designing a Water-Wise Landscape on November 16 at 6 p.m., as well as Garden Talk, Rain Gardens, December 13, 6 p.m. as well. You can also find recordings of past webinars at the link that you see on your screen. Thank you so much. If you have any questions regarding Sunnyvale's rebates, you can always look into reach out to any of those numbers and email address. So now I have the pleasure to introduce our instructor of today, Juanita Salisbury, a native garden specialist. Juanita has a PhD on biopsychology from the University of Florida, as well as a Bachelor in Science in Landscape Architecture from West Virginia University. In 2009, she established the Juanita Salisbury Landscape Architecture after working on commercial and residential design firms. She has recently turned her focus to California native plant pollinator habitats. And in 2016, she established the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden, the first of 8 pollinator garden habitat gardens in Palo Alto. The gardens combine her educational background, the biology and behavior of food intake, with design expression born from landscape architecture. Her focus is to research and educate about these habitats, as well as exploring opportunities to install more of them. And with that, I want to pass it on to Juanita, and everyone, please enjoy this webinar.
Thank you very much, Domingo. Let me share my screen and we can get started. Let's see. Here. From the beginning, I think. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me and Domingo and Victoria this evening. Tonight I'm going to talk about water-wise winter color for habitat gardens. And I'm happy to be talking about this. Winter is going to be upon us pretty soon, and it is planting season. So this is a very timely thing. I do have a social media presence. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden, or my YouTube channel, Primrose Way. And if you don't like social media, you can check me out, check us out at the primrosewaypollinatorgarden.com. That is also a place where I have a form that you can fill out if you want to contact us, if you're interested in volunteering. Always looking for those volunteers. And we do have a number of gardens here in Palo Alto that are native plant habitats. And there are a lot of them. We have the first garden, the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden here, the Island Drive Pollinator Garden, Arcadia Place, Hopkins Avenue, Gwynda Street Garden, West Greenwich Place, and the Churchill Street Pollinator Garden. And we're connecting those gardens, at least these first two here, Gwynda and Primrose, via the Embarcadero Road Pollinator Corridor. So lots to see in the gardens. You can check them out anytime to see what plants look like. If you're interested in looking at different forms and colors, check them out at different times of year to get an idea about how they might look in your own garden. One of the things I like to really emphasize about gardens, and I'm basically all about the native plants, is that they're really dynamic spaces. And when you have a dynamic space, basically that space is always evolving, it's always changing. And so the relationships that you have between plants, the plants themselves, organisms that use the plants, their caretakers, and the overall structure of a garden will change over time because it is a living thing, and living things don't stay the same. That's one of the characteristics of life, is that it does evolve and organize itself over time. Now, an overview of what I'm talking about tonight, I'll talk a bit about California native plants, and then a little bit about biology and water and winter color, and then some kind of housekeeping things on propagation, maintenance, and some other considerations to really help your gardens thrive. And yes, these photographs, I do take a lot of photographs of insects because I'm very interested to see the organisms that are actually using my gardens. And so I monitor them, and I have been monitoring them almost weekly for the last 7 years. So I have lots of great observations, and I'll be sharing some of those with you. But why California native plants? Well, California is a biodiversity hotspot. Here in California, we have thousands of species that are found nowhere else on the planet, some not even found outside of the state. Lots of them are drought tolerant, and we have lots of pollinators here. We have about 1,600 species of native bees, more than any other state in the United States, and 4,000 species of bees across the United States. We know that honeybees don't count, they're not native. And plants are important for the insects, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. But insect species, including pollinators, are declining worldwide. And in some places, insect species have declined 70%. And plants need pollinators to survive. So we want to understand the relationships between insects and plants to help both things continue to live and thrive. What to plant? And so my go-to resource for plants, and this is a screenshot of the calscape.org database. Super easy to use, searchable database done by the California Native Plant Society. And you can find information and resources. You can find plants for your area and research the plants, and then create a palette of trees, shrubs, vines, perennials, and bulbs. And they break it down for you. All plants, you can see 7,984 trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, grasses, succulents, and so on and so forth. And you can spend weeks, hours, and years, all your time, spare time, looking at great plants, because we have a lot. But to understand the relationships between plants and everything else in order to really help things thrive and to use water efficiently. And because I used to do research on eating and drinking in animals, a question that has come up is who to feed instead of what to plant. We know that plant species need insects, specifically pollinators, to survive. And we know that because when we have pollinators, bees moving pollen around and fertilizing plants, we get things happening like speciation much more quickly. Speciation is basically where you have variations in form and color that come because of you have a lot of genetic diversity in the seeds that are created when you pollinate a plant. And the pollen from these plants, when they're moved around by pollinators, it's very specific. So it's not like a wind pollinated plant that just spews its pollen out into the air willy-nilly and goes everywhere and causes allergies. When you have something physically moving pollen around for you, it's just more efficient in terms of creating new morphologies and lots of genetic diversity. And so those pollinators are creating lots of plants by making lots of seeds, lots of baby plants for other species to use, like butterflies and moth larvae. And so the best way to determine who to feed is take a look at the website here at CalScape. They talk about the butterflies and moths native to specific locations, and you can find out here in California, we have at least 1,368 species. And then it talks about the different butterflies and their host plants, so the things that they eat. If you want things like painted ladies in your garden, if you want things like the common buckeye or the red admirals or the morning cloaks or silvery blues, all these beautiful creatures, instead of thinking about what to plant, think about the butterflies that you might want in your garden. You're going, but what does that have to do with winter color? I'm getting there. What I'm trying to say here is that when we look at biology, we have to consider that biological factors may be more important considerations than biological factors, abiotic factors like climate, geology, and water for determining what to plant. So when you choose a plant, you are choosing those organisms that eat those plants. So you're making a choice on the butterflies that you will have in your garden. So this is my great animation slide, which I call the photons to proteins slide. So energy from the sun is converted by plants and then eaten by insects. And that is how we get energy from the sun into the food web, where baby birds and other organisms eat them. So this is how they get energy from the sun. The intermediaries are the plants. And if you want these native insects, these native caterpillars, this fat, juicy caterpillar, you have to plant native plants that they eat. Insects are picky. They're picky eaters, and they only generally eat the native plants that they evolved with. So if your garden doesn't have about 70% native plants in it, it'll be very difficult for you to support birds. That's what the research says. About 70% is what is needed to sustain nesting populations in your yard. So that's the science of it. It's pretty easy. From the sun, those cosmic rays coming down, getting transformed into protein, and then turned into birds. So you can turn sunlight into life. And so plants then aren't really decorative. We're going to talk about color because we like to see pretty things, but plants are food. And so that means when you plant native, you are going to have larvae. This is because it's food and everything eats. And so when I look for plants in a nursery, I look for plants that have holes in it, because when you plant natives, this means that you will have native insects eating those plants. And that in turn means that you will have birds and other creatures using your habitat. Why is it important? Biology, once again. Let's talk about a really broad concept about water. So biological connections in the hydrocycle, okay, where we have water evaporating and getting transferred through different places in the environment. It also gets into plants and animals. And those plants and animals store water in their living tissues and move it through the environment. Okay, it's not non-biological like evaporation. Okay, creatures account for water storage. So you're storing water inside animals that get their moisture from plants. And so that's how you can store water in your yard without a rain barrel. You just use plants and creatures that eat them, and you'll be enabling life to store water for you. Living dynamic life as water storage. Mind-blowing concept, but that's how it works. So plant uptake, plants and animals are eating things, and then you have evapotranspiration, where plants release water into the atmosphere. So that's a little part of the water cycle. But we have this little part called the biological hydrocycle, in which living things are using that water because everything needs water to live. And so that's what we want to focus on, how to make this the most efficient process as possible. And you can really be really efficient with your water use by finding out how much water plants use. Some of these California plants are very low water use, okay? And so one place that you can go and look, I mean, they talk about low water use on the Calscape site, and medium water use, high water use, and so forth. But you can actually see what that means in terms of what they call the plant factor. And that's just a fancy word for how much of a percentage of, like, if you had turf lawn, if a turf lawn is like 100%, what's a very low water use plant? 0 to 10% of a turf grass lawn. Low water use, 20 to 30%, medium 40 to 60, high 70 to 100%. So you can really squeeze out as much life as possible from really using low water use plants because those plants aren't dry. They just use water super efficiently. Okay, so, and there's a great link that you can link to. Super easy to look up a lot of different plants. It's not just native plants, it's other plants too. But really, to keep that water inside living tissue where it belongs, you're going to need to plant native. So let's talk about color. Okay, you know, we can touch a little bit on color theory because I am, after all, a designer, and I like to talk about the color wheel. And we have warm colors of yellows, oranges, and reds, and then the cooler colors of the blues, the purples, and the greens. Okay, and you can have all kinds of interesting color combinations that, depending on your personal aesthetic, you can get the cool, warm contrast between maybe a blue and a yellow, or you can do a harmony in which you choose colors that have something in common. Maybe they're close together on the color wheel, or they share a level of saturation. Okay, are they light or are they dark? Okay, that's what saturation means. This is whether it's a lighter color or more saturated, is it darker? So lots of different things depending on what your particular color aesthetic is. What color do you like? And to really kind of create a backbone of color for you, you can choose those plants that are evergreen, that have leaves all year round. They don't drop all their leaves at once. And those plants with the dark green, shiny, lush leaves make your garden look not dry. Okay, some people go, oh, I need a plant gardens. They always look really dry. They don't have to. They can look super lush. Glossy leaves make us think of tropical places. California is Mediterranean. It's not tropical exactly. So you can really create that lush look with a dark green, leafy, glossy leaf. And when you have contrast between dark and light colors, or between across the color wheel from each other, you can create contrast and interest that way. So just a couple of quick little things about color theory there for you. And winter. Winter goes from December 21st to March 19th. I generated these pictures using an AI artist, so I thought they were kind of interesting to play with that. But so winter, that's winter solstice there with your nice little candles, and then you have springtimes occurring in March. But those months between December and March, the next few pictures I'm going to show you are from winter. And winter is a very special time in California because we have things that are active all year round. Some things are super active during the winter time. And if you like a good pink flower, I'm going to talk about specific plants here. Ribes malvaceum, a variety called Christie Ridge. This is December at the Hopkins Avenue Garden. Very low water use, blooms for weeks and weeks and weeks with these beautiful panicles of pale pinkish flowers with kind of these white tips here. Gets to be about 5 to 8 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It will drop its leaves during the summer, but like many plants that we have, they really come to life during the winter as soon as the rains start. They puff out, they send out leaves and blooms. And it's a host plant to 3 confirmed and 76 likely species of moths and butterflies. Okay, so caterpillars are going to be eating these leaves, yes, in winter, and dropping down into the leaf litter where they're going to hang out and hide out in that leaf litter, so don't use your leaf blowers. And so you'll be storing water in those caterpillars. But we also have, in wintertime, bumblebees coming out. And December and January are big bumblebee months here in the Bay Area. Bumblebees are one of those few bees that can actually control their body temperature. And they do this, they kind of like warm things up by vibrating their wings. And they're furry, so they're slightly insulated. And bumblebees have a long tongue, so they like these long tubular flowers. And these long tubular flowers give them nectar. And the nectar, which is moisture, yet more moisture, getting cycled through these plants, is because of the shape of the flowers actually keep the moisture from evaporating so that the nectar stays nice and thin. So these bumblebees with these long tongues that are like straws can suck it up more readily and keep moving around in the environment because the nectar is sugar water. And if you've ever tried to suck up a milkshake, a really thick one through a straw, it's hard. It's much easier to suck up water or something very fluidy and very thin when you have a long tongue. So these tubular shaped flowers, you see these a lot blooming at this time of year because these things they go hand in hand with each other. When the flowers bloom, the things that use those flowers come out and use them. And so uh, really, I can't say enough about this particular shrub. Super easy to grow and puts on a huge show at Christmas time. And it's just a joy to see. Another one that's super awesome is the Heteromelia, Heteromelies arbustifolia, the toyon. Let's just call it a toyon. Okay, people call it the hollyberry, and it's an evergreen shrub, and it has white blooms in the springs, and then these red berries that start pretty much now and will be on this shrub for months until the birds eat them all. Cedar waxwings love these things. Super easy to grow. You can grow them from seed. And I'm a big advocate of growing things from seed because it's just easier to put a seed in the soil, and they do grow quite quickly. This one here, I believe that is over at the Gwynda Street Garden, and it's next to a white sage, a Salvia apiana. And you can see that we have a dark and light contrast here, so your eye kind of goes to that contrast. So you have this really interesting color combination. Um, and it's a larval host for several different moths and butterfly species. And another design tip here is that when you have light colored or white colors next to a darker color, white makes things look darker, whereas black makes things look warmer. So another little color theory tip for you. And so, a great, super easy to grow shrub. I have one in my own home garden that once I planted it, I never watered it afterwards. And it's about 15 feet tall now. So super easy to grow the toyon. Wonderful shrub. Another favorite is Verbena lilacina de la Mina. And this is evergreen. It's a low shrub, low water use. It starts blooming in January and it goes for months. And this thing smells like heaven. It's just so wonderful. Super fragrant. I mean, I can smell these from half a block away when I'm walking up to the gardens. Super attractive, a nectar source for bees, butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds. Bees love, love, love these flowers. They will just be glomming onto them. So again, keeping that moisture going through the biological hydrocycle here, keeping things in living tissue. Super attractive, easy to grow, and they during the dry part of the year you can cut them back and they'll sprout out again. But super easy to grow. And no discussion of winter flowers would be complete without talking about Arctostaphylos densiflora. This is a variety called Howard McMinn. It's one of these from, I believe, like the Sonoma County area. Easy to grow shrub again. And it has these beautiful white blossoms on it in January. So again, super important for the long-tongued pollinators who are sucking up the nectar there, and a host plant likely for 36 species of butterflies and moths. And again, very low water use. It's almost impossible to kill these plants, except if you give them too much water. So, just a great sparkling plant. So I love a good white flower too. I think they look fresh. They look just so refreshing to look at. And another white flower plant is Ceanothus rigidus, snowball. We have a lot of different Ceanothus species here in California. Some are early blooming, some are mid blooming, some are late blooming. One that blooms in January is this one over at the Island Drive garden, and it goes for a couple of months. And so you get a lot of bang for the buck out of this plant. Very low water use, likes to be in the full sun, gets to be 4 to 6 feet tall. The one at Island Drive, I would say, is probably more like 2 feet tall, and it keeps getting wider and wider and wider. I think it's probably 10 to 12 feet wide now. And a likely larval host for over 77 butterflies and moth species. So again, keeping water in living tissue where it's supposed to be. But look how beautiful this is. The white sparkling blossoms in the sunshine. Just really a great shrub. And also providing, a lot of these plants also provide cover for birds that nest on the ground, like juncos. Okay, and we do have nesting pairs in all of our gardens so far of juncos. It's been very interesting to see that. Ah, and sometimes you can combine these two together in masses, which is much more efficient for pollinators to do this one-stop shopping where they have a massive bloom. Again, the Ceanothus rigida next to the Arctostaphylos densiflora, you can see it has kind of even almost a pale pink tinge that's made much darker by the white flowers next to it. Okay, those flowers do have like a little pink blush to them. But what an attractive combination, this really fine textured, sparkling white bloom together. When you mass plants like this for color, you can really get a huge impact seeing these things together like this. And I just love the show that these plants put on every December. I always go in December, and I'm just like so anxious for this bloom because these are covered with bumblebees in December, January, and February when they like to come out. Yet another Ceanothus. This is an early bloomer, and I recommend this one to everybody. It's so easy to grow. Ceanothus maritima, a selection called Valley Violet, and it has these beautiful kind of blue, almost periwinkle blue blossoms. Look how pretty that is. And it's fragrant, super low water use, starts to bloom in January. You can see this is a black-tailed bumblebee here, one of the two different kinds that we have that I see a lot in Palo Alto. And these black-tailed bumblebees actually come out earlier than the yellow-faced bumblebees that come out just a little bit later. But they're active in the winter months and are using these plants. Evergreen, you see, has these nice glossy leaves, looks good all year round, and just an easy plant to grow. Put it in a sunny spot. It will even grow in shade, but in the shade, it actually takes on a different form. It's actually more of a ground cover. That's how it's performed over at the Island Drive garden. In full sun, it's more shrubby. So, you know, just a really great plant. Yet another ribes. Here we have Ribes viburnifolium. This is an evergreen plant. This is actually in my own home yard, and the leaves aren't sick. They just have a yellow tinge to them, and that's just their color. So you get kind of this interesting yellow-green color. But then in wintertime, you have these sparkling ruby-colored flowers here, and I always have a lot of berries left over when the flowers are done, which means that when you have berries and seeds and things like that forming, you know that you have pollinators, and the birds eat the fruit. So it's a win for both insects and pollinators, and larval host for over 30 species of butterflies and moths. Super low water use and extremely easy to grow. It's a great shrubby plant. And it forms also a nice cover for birds to hide. And you know you're doing gardening right when you go out into the yard and birds fly everywhere and moths fly out of stuff when you're watering stuff by hand. That's how you know that you're doing it correctly, when you see those organisms that use the plants using them. But this is a great kind of like a Christmassy look, I think, with the red and the green. Just a beautiful. These are tiny blossoms, but they're massive in these masses like this. So very showy as a whole, I think. Yet another ribes. Um, you know, here we have Ribes californicum. This one is at the Primrose Way Garden, and these plants are in the full sun on the hot end of the garden at the west end. And in response to rain, you can see this was taken last year during the big rainy season that we had. These leafed out and they just gave all these panicles of these beautiful red blossoms that are super attractive to hummingbirds. And also, because they're tubular flowers, also really attractive to bumblebees. And if you need a barrier shrub, there's nothing better than something thorny. And these things are very, very sharp, thorny plants. So a great barrier shrub, also great habitat plant because things can take shelter in them, birds and other organisms, and they can be protected in there. They are drought deciduous, means that when there's less water, they won't have as many leaves. They'll drop all the leaves and they'll look dead, and you'll see these thorny canes sticking out of the ground. But they're not dead. This is just how the plants respond in wintertime when we have water, and a likely larval host to over 80 species of moths and butterflies. So again, these plants are colorful and life enhancing to a lot of different things in your habitat. So super great plant. Just, I mean, look how showy those are. It almost doesn't look real. They look like decorations hanging down. Just a great shrub. Now, if you want some perennials, these are Ranunculus californicus, otherwise known as the buttercup. And you can see it has these shiny petals here. Kind of hard to photograph because they are so reflective. And, attractive to these little pollinators. The yellow blooms will start in February with the rain and continue for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they completely die back to the ground and disappear after blooming. You'll think, oh, where did they all go? They're underground. They're just waiting until the winter time and the rains to come out and give you a mass of these beautiful cheery yellow flowers. They are such great plants. They're super pretty in late winter, early spring. And you can eat the seeds actually, and they will self-sow. They have spread themselves around in our Primrose Way garden, which is one of the things when I said that the garden doesn't stay the same over time. Plants spread, gardeners know how plants like to move around to places that suit them. So just a really fun, pretty little plant. Yet another ribes. I'm not done with ribes. Let's call this evening in praise of ribes species. This is Ribes aureum variety gracilimum, and this is otherwise known as the golden currant because it is covered in the wintertime with these yellow tubular blossoms. Look how pretty those are. Very kind of delicate looking and super attractive, like tubular flowers are, to both bees and to hummingbirds. And they start in late February and early March and continue for weeks and weeks and weeks. And super low water use. They grow great next to oak trees. And the ripe berries, as you can see, I have in my hand here. This is at the Hopkins Avenue Garden. And if you have room for these shrubs, plant 2 or 3 so that they can cross-pollinate a little bit and you'll end up with more of these berries. I was picking handfuls of these berries for weeks during the summertime. They have a little seed in them, but they're super juicy. Again, water storage in something yummy. I'm part of the water hydrocycle too, and they're just very tasty. And larval host for over 70 species of moths and butterflies. So again, great habitat plant, super, just a super productive shrub with color, with habitat goodies for insects and other creatures. And tasty treats for the humans. So all in all, just a lot of bang for your buck in this particular shrub. Yet there's more. Uh, so this is Vaccinium ovatum, our native huckleberry. And this is an evergreen shrub that has white flowers in February. Okay, so it's kind of like a blueberry. And in February, March, these little white tubular flowers. So again, bumblebees, hummingbirds, and carpenter bees really like these. They have a lot of nice nectar in them. Low water use, a likely larval host to over 50 species of moths and butterflies, makes a great upright hedge. These actually in my home yard are in full sun. They get late afternoon shade. I give them a little bit of extra water when it's super hot out. And they say that they're slow growing, but a secret tip here to make them grow faster is to use cottonseed meal as a fertilizer. Cottonseed meal for the native huckleberry is like candy, and they will just grow super fast. When I feed them cottonseed meal, they reward me with a couple of feet of growth in 1 year. And then you end up with these blueberries, these little tasty, intensely flavored berries. Again, moisture saved as fruit for the humans, glossy leaves, and just super colorful, beautiful shrub in the wintertime. So, in praise of blueberries, you can make all kinds of cordials out of the berries. They're just super tasty. You can make syrups out of them. Intense blueberry flavor, just really yummy. More berries, please. I'm all about the mealtime, so it's not really a surprise. I used to research it. Fragaria virginiana. This is our native strawberry, one of them. We have lots of different species of Fragaria, but the one that has the best tasting berries is the virginiana. And this berry is the berry that was used to make our commercial larger berries, okay? It was hybridized, and so we have the big, gigantic strawberries that people grow in their gardens and stuff. But if you want a strawberry that tastes like candy, let me turn you on to Fragaria virginiana. These are evergreen plants with these cute little white flowers. This is over at the Island Drive Garden. This is in wintertime, and these are super yummy, and other things will eat them, so you have to like harvest them as soon as they're ready. Low moisture, easy from seed. To spread them around, I'll just like pick a berry and stick it where I want a new plant. So I like to tuck these into little spaces, so little surprises here and there, and walking out in your garden, if you see a snack, good thing. And a likely larval host to 30 species of butterflies and moths. So you can freeze them, you can like collect them and freeze them and have a whole bunch at once because they are tiny, but boy, they're intensely tasty, just amazingly tasty. So you heard it here first, and they will self-sow. So just a really good little plant. Something different. Okay, so here we have Paratoma arborea, otherwise known as bladder pod. And this is easy from seed. I mean, seriously, no reason to grow this out in a pot. Just stick a seed into the ground where you want it. Very low water use. It's actually a desert plant, and it blooms almost year-round. And as you can see, it's providing nectar to hummingbirds. And the pods are edible. I haven't tried them. They're like little peas in a pod. You cook them, I guess, boil them for 10 minutes or something. I haven't tried them yet. Maybe this year. We'll see. But super easy to grow. Larval host for several butterfly and moth species. And when I say easy to grow, in one season they can grow 3 feet and form a nice, robust shrub for you. So you can get a lot of habitat in 1 year from seed with your Paratoma arborea, and they do persist. They're not short-lived. We've had some at Island or at the Primrose Garden for the last 7 years, and they seem to be going strong. Easy to prune to shape, just a nice little shrub. But if you want annual plants, you know, if you like that first flush of bloom that annual flowers provide, seeds are great. And these are in a garden that I take care of down the street from me. Annual wildflowers reseeded and sprouting from the rain. This is March 16th, so we're still in winter. So these have been going for a while. The yellow is Lea platyglossa, otherwise known as tidy tips. And then the blue is Phacelia campanularia. Look at how beautiful blue that is. And the orange blossoms in the back is Serratia ambigua, growing back there. All of these are from seed. This is a shrub that I grew from seed, but these are annuals. That is not an annual. But here we have a cool, warm contrast. And when you have things, here's color theory, right? Across the color wheel from each other, you can really create something really vibrant like this, where you have not only a cool, warm contrast, but a light, dark contrast. So you have the darker blue of the Phacelia with the lighter, less saturated color of the yellow Lea platyglossa. But how pretty is that? I love a blue flower, and look how pretty those are. And this garden, I never know exactly how it's going to look every year because the seeds kind of go where they want to go. And when you let nature do what she wants, this is your reward. And these are great habitat plants also because they are food for insects, pollinators certainly, but the seeds of the tidy tips here are one of the favorites of finches. And finches will feed, they're one of the few birds that can feed their young seeds. And these are just very seedy flowers, and they'll never go away. Once you start planting them, you'll have them forever. And the finches will be out there just chomping down on these things. So yet another great, so many benefits. Color, you've got vibrancy, you've got habitat, you're saving water. These are basically not watered at all. These are sprouting from rain. And you're keeping all these energy sources in the environment. So, annuals, can't go wrong. Here's another Phacelia. It's early March, still in wintertime. This is Phacelia ciliata, a light kind of purpley blue flower here. And it's will reseed in place, and it blooms for weeks and weeks and weeks in the late winter time. And here you have a color harmony. Okay, instead of a contrast, you have something harmonizing. And here's some more color theory for you. A harmony is created when you have elements that have things in common. And so the things that these have in common are that they are both not very saturated, okay, they're light colored, and they're also from the cool spectrum, the greens and the blues. So you have like harmony in terms of saturation and harmony in terms of placement on the color wheel. So a different kind of look, not so vibrant, but maybe more soothing. So it depends on what your aesthetic is. I love them all. It's hard for me to decide. But again, this garden is not watered. These things are coming from seed. And then the white sage in the background makes a nice foil for all kinds of plants. Again, use evergreen shrubs to kind of give you the backdrop for your other blooms. And again, Vaccinium ovatum, that huckleberry, the coffee berry, which doesn't have really a showy bloom, but it has these lush, dark green leaves, super easy from seed. You can actually sow seeds in place and they'll sprout and you'll get a nice shrub. The Arctostaphylos, those manzanitas, they come in so many different forms with those white blossoms. They come in as ground covers and as shrubs, Ribes viburnifolium. So if you have about 75% of your garden as evergreen, keeps your garden looking lush and green. Green's a color. And all these plants provide lots of cover for organisms that use the garden. So we're using the immense power of biology to bring in and keep moisture in your garden. Okay, keeping it moving through those living tissues where it's supposed to go. So use plants that are taprooted to draw on the water table and deep soil moisture, things like oak trees, great habitat plants because those taproots go down. Lateral roots bring it up and spread it out to other plants. You can use native succulents. Look how juicy that is. You can use bulbs. Bulbs are a great water storage, fleshy crown plants, and encourage animals in your garden to keep moisture in your garden. So things like lizards, full of moisture, birds who eat them will not disagree. So when you pair these biological ways of keeping water in the garden with non-biological ways to reduce water loss, like using mulch, shade, rocks, and so forth, you'll have more moisture actually trapped in your garden and cycling through those biological processes. So again, if you have lizards in your garden, you know you're doing it right because these are eating the insects and other creatures that are in there, like ticks, bleh, things like that. So yeah, little bags of moisture. Some general considerations, propagation, maintenance, and everything else. Like I mentioned before, I love seeds because I like to know everything about plants. I like to know what they look like as just the twinkle in the mother's and the father's eye of the plant of what they are as babies there. This is Fritillaria pluriflora, which is a bulb. And it takes like from seed to bulb 7 years to bloom, so start early. But seeds are great because they preserve genetic diversity. And the way I start seeds, and I want to know if how quickly they sprout, is to do what's called cold moist stratification and pre-germinate things. So I know that they've sprouted. I'm not just waiting around a pot waiting for something to emerge. I know it's actually sprouted because I can see the root tip at the end of the seed coming out. And cold moist stratification is basically you take a coffee filter, wet it down, label it, stick your seeds inside and put it in a plastic bag and stick it in the fridge and then check it every few days to see when things sprout. And then you can stick those outside or in pots. And you don't have to be fancy or rich. You can use paper cups, you can use egg crates. What that does, it just connects you with the knowledge about a plant's entire life cycle. And it's, again, easier to sow seeds in place than it is to dig a hole. Trust me on this one. If you've planted thousands of plants, you know, it's just seeds are easier. You just use your finger and stick them in the soil. And I'm always looking for things that I can do that because it's easier and cheaper and it's less disruptive to soil structure. So some best practices in your habitat garden. Native gardens are just less maintenance than with a non-native garden with a lawn. You don't have to mow things. You don't have to fertilize unless you have those huckleberries and you want to get that cottonseed meal going in there. But you don't have to do that. When you first plant and from then on, this is the main thing. Just keep the weeds down a little bit at a time. Don't let them build up. Just kind of keep plucking at them. Irrigate your plants to establish when you plant them about once a week or so. And then try to encourage the roots to search out water. You water deeply just outside that root ball because you don't want the root ball to be all like moist and rotting. You want those roots to actually seek out water in the environment and they'll seek out other plants and they'll do their plant community, get to know each other thing. Prune sparingly and to control dried up and dead material for fire safety. I prune almost never because seed heads feed birds, and so I just leave those as long as I possibly can. You don't need to fertilize, amend sparingly, mulch to control weeds initially and to help establish the plants, and then mulch with leaves. Leave the leaves because that's where your butterfly and moth pupa are going to be hanging out is in that leaf litter, and they will overwinter there and then emerge as adults later. If you don't like the way it looks, you can do what I call the skim coat of bark chips on the top of those leaves. And it looks like you spent a lot of money on mulch, but in reality, it just is a nice even surface of one chip thick mulch on the top. You can leave areas of bare dirt for nests because 70% of our native bees nest underground. And if you have plants and you want seeds and berries, these bees will nest in your yard. It's kind of fun to like see where they go. And yet another reason not to dig too many holes and just like stick seeds in, because then you're not disrupting any nesting. Don't use leaf blowers in planted areas, please. Do not do it. Leaves will break down. Don't worry about your plants getting smothered. You can move the leaves off, your plants with your hand or something like that, but those leaves will break down, and those nutrients trapped in those leaves will actually get back into the soil. And that's really good for the plants. Leaves are ecosystem gold. And so people throw these things out, they put them in the compost. It's like, oh, leave them. You won't be sorry. So do more by doing less. And I don't have to tell you guys, don't use pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides, anything that's killing things that is storing the moisture for you. So really do more by doing less. That's the message here. Doing more by doing less. So here we have in January of 2022, there's a Peritoma arborea, the bladder pod blooming in the background. Here's a hummingbird, though. And what is she doing in January? She is collecting fluff off of the goldenrod in January for her nest. I had actually gone out that day I was thinking, oh, it's looking unsightly. I better cut it down. No, I left it because nature has a plan for things like this, like seed heads and fluffy leftover flowers, flower heads like that. In your habitat garden, you want things to use those resources. Okay. And these plants, as I mentioned before, berries and moisture and nectar and pollen and food for larvae, they provide so many resources. Those resources don't always reveal themselves to you until they do. And she revealed to me what is actually happening here and collecting fluff. And that was a lesson that I learned that day. And so I went home and had some coffee, and I didn't come back to cut that down until a couple of months later. And it was good because I got to do less. Nesting and shelter, just remember that when you've got these insects and they will be eating your plants, that's a good thing. Don't worry about it. Each of these little caterpillars here, they spend a lot of time in this form. Some of them spend months or years in this form. Some of them overwinter before they emerge in the spring. And the adult lifespan of these insects is actually pretty short. And so that's what you see a lot of times. So I'm always looking. I look at butterflies flying around and things like that, but I'm also looking for larvae because I want to know who's eating my plants. And so the insight here is just remember that these guys here is a bag of moisture and nutrients and perhaps a meal for something else. And so, and they also provide a little bit of color too, just on a smaller scale. I mean, look, this guy's kind of yellow and green. And some of them actually take on the colors of the flowers that they're eating, which is kind of interesting. Again, with all the color that you get in the wintertime, remember that among the goals of a native plant habitat is to optimize opportunities for organisms to complete their life cycles. Allow time for biological processes to take place. Don't be in a hurry to do anything in the garden, but be in a hurry to enjoy it. Always like sit and wait and see what's happening. You want to support the relationships between the native plants and the organisms that use them. So do more by doing less maintenance. And here we have, this is at the Hopkins Avenue Garden, we have two Ackman blue butterflies in a mating dance. And I was privileged to see them flirting like this, just kind of flying around. And, when you have organisms completing their life cycles as adults, mating and making the next generation, then you know you're doing it right. And just a really beautiful thing to see. Finally, so I know it's a lot. I gave you some specific plants to try in your garden because these plants I mentioned should work in many gardens, and you can take a look to see if they might work in a situation that you have. But among the other ecosystem services the plants provide and all the resources, once you understand these relationships in nature, you learn how to optimize the power of your native plant garden, and that leads to an abundance of life. And that life is storing that moisture for you, as well as the enhancement of your appreciation and your role in caring for nature's complex beauty. And you will be rewarded with all the color that winter provides. And with that, I'll be happy to take any sort of questions.
Excellent. And we have a couple really good ones, one that I've been holding off since the very beginning. Someone asked, are there any particular plants to set out to attract particularly endangered insects, even if those plants are not flowery?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So one of my favorite butterflies that I see are the blue species. So there's the ones that I showed you at the end there, flying around, the Icaricia acmen, the acmen blue butterfly, and they tend to feed on Eriogonum latifolium, the coastal buckwheat. That one is good, but there are also butterflies that prefer some other things. So, I mean, buckwheats, the Eriogonum species, are really good for, or the Eriogonum genus is good for those blue butterflies and a lot of other kinds of butterflies. But this year, I grew milkvetch, Astragalus natalii, kind of a hard plant to find. And so the milkvetch that I'm growing, the Astragalus natalii, is a larval food source for the western tail blue butterfly, which I only saw for the first time this year because I have a huge patch of it growing in a very specific location, and I was blown away by this. So the milk vetch species like that, if you have a spot to grow that plant, and it's kind of hard to find, if people are interested in growing that plant, I've actually started a bunch of seeds. I've got a ton of seeds. So it's pretty easy with cold moist stratification. These things are ready to like burst out of their seed pods. That's a great one to grow. The mallow species of plants, like the Malva flora, which has a really beautiful purple flower on it. And you can see that one over at the Hopkins Avenue Garden. That one provides a lot of food for a very specific kind of a skipper butterfly that I had not seen before growing there. So the Malva species, the Malva genus, those mallows, those are really good. Along in the other mallow in the genus is Malacothamnus fremontii. And we have that at 3 of our gardens, and those also will generate some different skipper butterflies for you. But you can look through to see the butterflies on the cowscape side and like find the butterflies on there that maybe you don't see very often, and then choose those host plants that they're guaranteed to feed on. So whenever I see a butterfly, I know that I have to plant more of that particular plant. There, as you know, there are some butterflies like monarchs that only feed on milkweed, and we do have milkweed in our gardens. So that's another good one to plant. Another good one that I like to plant, which just blows me away when I see these, are the pipevine swallowtail. Incredibly beautiful black butterfly with a shining blue wing part to it. And it only eats that plant, the pipevine plant, Aristolochia californica. It's a vine, super easy to grow. mostly grows up in the North Bay, but I see that butterfly down here because a lot of people do grow it here. So I'm incorporating that also into our gardens. So when I say that I monitor to see what's out there, I like to see what butterflies are flying. It's like, okay, what are you guys eating? I'm planting more of that. And I'm always hoping to see things that I haven't seen yet. And so that's why I'm always continuously adding plants to the gardens. And that's another great way to sort of have like backup systems for things. The more that you add plants to your garden, the more resilient it becomes. And actually, the more it conserves moisture because you have lots of organisms storing it for you. Um, so that's a long answer to that question. But yes, absolutely, there are plants. And um, you know, I would say go to take a look at Calscape and see what's recommended. If there's a particular butterfly that you want to grow in your garden, find that plant and plant it. It's planting season. You got to scramble and get those plants in the ground while it's raining. It's a perfect time for planting.
It is. It's a fantastic time. And that in mind, somebody had asked, where should we shop for seeds and plants? And I did recommend Kitazawa Seeds out of Oakland just because I like them, but I know they're not native specialists. So what would you recommend as far as native seeds go?
So there are a few different places I like to get native seeds. And one is Larner Seeds, that's up in Bolinas, and they have mail order. Another one is called Seed Hunt. Um, and they also have an online, but basically if you're interested in a very specific seed, I would do a search to see if you can find a source online where you can order it. Um, Hedgerow Farms is another one. S&S Seed is another. Calscape does have a list of nurseries and things like that where you can find these things as well. But I search far and wide for seeds. I've actually imported seeds from Great Britain because they're really into California natives in the United Kingdom for some reason. Things I couldn't find here, surprisingly, I did manage to find elsewhere. Also, you can make friends with people like me or volunteer in our gardens. I'm always looking for volunteers. And if you go to my website, there's a form that you can say, hey, Juanita, I want to volunteer. You will get seeds from me, as well as cuttings and seedlings and all sorts of goodies, because our gardens are extremely productive. And I'm always trying to give away plants and seeds because we have more than we can use. So it's just one of the perks to our band of volunteers is that you get goodies, lots of plants, lots of seeds.
That's excellent. I'm going to remember that for my own sake. And I am typing in the chat some of the names of plants that you've mentioned and also the seed companies in case people miss them. Please check the chat. We do have another question. Claire says, I have a native plant island in my neighborhood. Will the moths, butterflies, and bees eventually find my plants?
Yes. Yes, they will.
Short answer.
Yes, it's all about the mealtime. And you put that food out, they will find it. It might not happen quickly, but when you see that you have holes in your plants and things are chewing on it, they found it. And if you go with the best practices and, invite them over for dinner and have them stay, leave the leaves and all that sort of thing, then you'll start your own population in your yard. And then you can talk to your neighbors and like connect everything because connectivity is super important for helping these organisms to move around. It gives them pathways to follow.
And it's great when you see people. I actually have a lot of native plants, like mostly native plants in my garden, and my two neighbors across the street have started doing the same. And you see things darting around, and it's just exciting to see them moving from lot to lot instead of kind of huddling in one place. So it provides activity and entertainment for the whole neighborhood.
Yes, and so the thing about these native gardens, if you see like a native garden that's like isolated from everything else, you go by it, it's like going by the Great Barrier Reef or something like that, because there's all this movement and activity at different levels. It's like fish on coral, and there's like predators flying around looking for things to like zip in and get things, and you just don't see that in these other yards that have no food for organisms to use. And in these yards where you have the native plants, I mean, it becomes like, because the birds will go there because you have food, it becomes almost like an aviary. And you don't have to put a bird feeder out because your plants are bird feeders. And the life that you see is just, you know, it's amazing to see this. The movement, the butterflies, the different species of things. I see new stuff all the time, and I'm always looking. And I'm continuously amazed. I've been doing this for a while now, and it's still new. It's always something new and beautiful.
It really is. And I get excited just hearing other people be excited about it. So, and
Yeah.
I've jotted down so many notes from your talk tonight. So thank you for that. We do have another question that I partially answered. Someone had asked earlier, if a plant is host to many larvae, then leaves will be eaten. Will the plant survive and grow flowers? How many plants should I buy to feed larvae and enjoy the plant and flowers?
So if your plant is really getting chewed up, plant more of it, because it means that it's really, really good. Um, and so, but I haven't really found that to be a huge issue. Even if I have like one of something and it's really getting chewed up, it's never chewed up so much that I don't have flowers or I can't enjoy it, because everything is something else's meal. And so things like wasps are always on the lookout for caterpillars to feed their offsprings. They're not like bees who are vegetarians. All other insects are carnivores. And so it's really brutal in the insect world. And so the more species that you have, the more predators will come in and kind of balance things out. So no one particular plant is going to be so chewed up unless you don't have like a good mix of things. That's why I tell people keep adding plants, because then your foundation for diversity allows all kinds of sort of checks and balances to occur between predator and prey. You'll have praying mantises, you'll have lizards come in, so nothing gets too out of hand. So, nature will strike a balance, because, it's all about the mealtime out there, and things get eaten.
Speaking of things getting eaten, we just had another comment come in. I have a native garden, but it's so successful in attracting birds that it makes it very difficult for propagation from seed. They just gobble up any wildflower seeds. What do you recommend we do?
So what I do to protect plants before they're established is I will put either chicken wire over things.
Mm.
I use wire waste baskets to go over plants. I will use wire baskets that I've gotten from like the Container Store, to just any sort of barrier until the plant is like big enough to sort of hold its own against the birds. Um, my yard is a combination of habitat and protection from the squirrels and the birds that really just go to town on things. So, yeah.
And I did just want to ask, we did have a comment that I already answered. Somebody's asking what type of shrubs do monarch butterflies like? And I said milkweeds only. And I know that Asclepias fascicularis is native to Santa Clara County, but do you have other Asclepias species, species that you would recommend?
I particularly like the speciosa, the showy milkweed. And I know it's more kind of like a North Bay plant, and I like it because the flowers smell like roses to me. They just smell so good. And talk about a plant that provides resources. I also like it for the big leaves, because if you're a habitat person who is like licensed to raise monarch caterpillars to butterflies, the leaves are just easier to feed the caterpillars because they're big. One leaf can like last a day or two for a big fat caterpillar. Um, but another resource that milkweed provides is fiber. And so I'm always very interested in you know, just everything that a plant can provide. And so the milkweeds, the Asclepias speciosa stalks, the ones that we have like over at the Island Drive Garden, those suckers can be like 8 feet tall. And so you have these really long stalks and you can get really cool fiber, long pieces of fiber that you can make twine out of. Um, if anybody's interested in making some twine, I've got some stalks left over from last year that I haven't gotten to. Um, that's one of my preferences. And you know, I see monarchs flitting around those all the time. They don't seem to have any problem using the leaves, um, even though they're not the fascicular, the type that grows around here. So, you know, it's a matter of preference. I don't particularly think it's a terrible thing in an urban environment to provide something that may not be completely local, as long as you have some local things. To have other things from maybe adjacent areas is probably not a bad thing.
Okay, I think that wraps up our questions. They seem to have tapered off. I don't see any last minute ones coming in. I do have a personal question for you. Have you
Okay.
had any success? You mentioned propagation earlier in propagating. I know it's not local to here, but Dendromicon harfordii, the Channel Island bush poppy.
Um, I've tried starting that from cuttings and I've had limited success, let's just
Okay.
say.
Okay.
But it's not hard to find in a nursery. I actually picked up a plant from the Summer Winds nursery recently.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, because we found them at Almaden Valley Nursery recently, and that was like the first time in years I'd been able to find them anywhere.
Interesting.
But I know that's one that blooms almost year round and definitely through the winter. And
Yeah.
so it came to mind when you were talking, and we tried propagating from cuttings with zero success. So and I know like they're supposed to be like fire propagated by seed, and that's not something that I'm equipped to do. So
Yeah, I mean, I tried that and I did you try maybe a rooting hormone?
no, I did
There's
not.
there's a, you know, one of our local fungi that we have
Mhm.
here, the Bohemian truffle. I might have mentioned this in a previous talk. Um, it's also called dead man's foot fungus.
Oh,
It cu- you, if you when you're done, maybe Google it. And you might see these coming up in your own garden. It looks like this hideous dead thing kind of emerging like a lump from the ground. Those are actually a really nice mycorrhizal, like an ectomycorrhizal connection between plants and the fungus for nutrient exchange underground.
mm.
And you can actually use the spores from it as a rooting hormone.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
I just wrote
So,
that down. I'm going to look into that. Thank you.
yeah.
You're a wealth of knowledge, and actually, you've had a couple comments in the chat and question and answer thanking you as well. So
Yeah, it's a pleasure, really.
it's a wonderful presentation. So unless we have anything else, and I don't see any more, I think that wraps it up for tonight. Did you have anything else you wanted to close with?
Um, you know, just another plug for those volunteers. I've got lots and lots of gardens, lots of opportunities for people to, you know, come out. I usually go out on weekends to do a little weeding and whatnot. And you can contact me through my primrosewaypollinatorgarden.com website. Um, you know, never any pressure. We're a good group. We have hats and vests that have our logo on them, so there's swag involved. Just, you know.
All right, well, excellent. I wrote down volunteering for myself as well. So I just wanted to thank you, Juanita. It was a wonderful presentation. And thank you, Domingo, for hosting with the city of Sunnyvale. It's been a pleasure having you entertain us tonight, both of you. And thank all of you who attended. Have a lovely evening and enjoy your upcoming holidays.
Thanks, Victoria. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care. Good night.
Night.